Hi, my name is Lesley Groubert. I'm a registered nurse at Mercy Health, and I am a health service coordinator with the Mercy Retain team.
Hi, my name is Sudzina, and I am one of the severity case managers with the Mercy Health Retain program.
Hi, my name is Kori Smith. I'm the program manager for Retain Ohio at Bon Secours Mercy Health. So Michelle, tell me a little bit about what your day-to-day looks like with Retain.
So as a severity nurse, I am going through the patient's charts. We receive a report in the morning and we review those charts. I go through test results, I'm looking at insurance, I'm looking at surgeries that are scheduled, and basically I am looking for those patients who will be eligible for the recruitment process for the study.
How many charts would you say you review a day?
On average, I review anywhere from 100 to 150 charts. There are 3 severity nurse roles, so we also have them reviewing the same amount of charts. So we're anywhere from about 400 to 500 charts a day.
Wow. How about you, Lesley? How does your role differ from Michelle's? What does your day-to-day look like?
My day-to-day is basic care coordination of patients that are enrolled as a treatment patient. First, assessing physical needs when we first call the patient, going over any discharge instructions if they're fresh post-op, assessing any med changes or any needs. From there, we assess the psychosocial needs of the patient to see if there are any financial burdens, any mental health illness, or issues that they're having during their recovery, so that we can then engage the social worker for those transitions to help overcome those barriers. We're also looking at coordinating leave of absence and return to work with not only the employer, but the leave of absence case manager if the employer is enrolled, making sure that the patient is accountable for providing the right documentation to facilitate their short-term disability pay. And lastly, I would say making sure patients are keeping that line of communication open with the physicians to make sure that that return to work is a safe return to work.
Yeah, I love that. So how often would you say you contact a patient?
Dependent on patient needs. Usually it's once every 30 days or after a doctor's visits. However, we do have 3 acuities of patients we look at. We have high, medium, and low risk acuity patients, dependent on if a social worker is involved, if there's a callback, or more forms need to be filed. I would say on average each patient probably gets a phone call every 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow, so it seems like Retain provides a lot of services. So what makes this program different than programs that are currently out there?
I think that the case managers with the dual role of care coordination / return to work coordination, it's the same person. They're not talking to one person for this and a different person to help navigate back to work. You are able to get that trusting relationship going. There's the accountability that you can continue to push that patient to be directing their own plan of care, being in charge of the decisions they make. But at the same token, I feel like it focuses on the patient as an individual.
Yeah.
Well, and to add to what Lesley said, we work very closely with the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services and Ohio Means Jobs, and we also work with OOD, which is Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities. So we have an open line of communication with them. So if we have a patient who, say, has recently lost their job, we work, again, very closely with Ohio Means Jobs. We get that patient set up with Ohio Means Jobs, and then they will follow through with them. And we have had good success with that as well, because those patients have been able to find employment. Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, we have had patients who may be off work a little longer than anticipated. They've lost access to their insurance. We've been able to get them in touch with the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, or ODJFS, and they have been able to help them get set up with, say, CareSource or Medicaid or some type of insurance, so that they're not struggling to make ends meet, by having to pay, additional bills out of pocket. They have also helped patients with setting up for food stamps. Not everybody has access to short-term disability. Some of our patients are off work for an extended period of time, and sometimes just a little bit of assistance with food assistance can help them manage other bills that they have. And Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, or OOD, they have also helped us help our patients with accommodations at work. I had one patient in particular who, she went back to work, but she was struggling because of the injury that she had. It was a neck and back injury, and she could not sit for a long period, could not stand for a long period, and we were able to get them involved, and they were able to provide her with a stand-up desk. But they also had engaged with the employer in providing her with a sofa, a reclining sofa, to assist her with that, and she could recline and work from her laptop computer versus her desktop computer during the day. So a lot of different services that they help us provide for our patients.
Yeah, I love that. So tell me about some of your most successful outcomes.
I have two patients in particular that will always pull on my heartstrings. The first patient, obviously I'm not going to say her name, but she was a single mother who was in the process of losing her home. She had a knee injury, she needed surgery. She was unable to, she actually ended up losing her job because she could not work because of the knee instability. And basically, looking at a homeless shelter is where she was headed, and that she had already made arrangements to go to the homeless shelter. She subsequently was able to find a job, a work-at-home position, and the only thing is she didn't have any income coming in because she lost her job, and she needed a desktop computer in order to have this position. Well, through the help of our social worker, through the help of ODJFS, they provided us with a resource, a who to contact, and our supportive services that we offer through the program. We were able to get her a desktop computer, and she is now working from home. She did not lose her home because she was able to work something out with her landlord for late payment, but to get her caught up. She had to wait a period of time before she could have her knee surgery, but she is scheduled to have her knee surgery at the end of this year. She did not have to go to a homeless shelter, which is wonderful. And she was so appreciative of that simple gesture of us helping her get that desktop computer because it changed the entire course of her life. And it was simple gesture. The other patient, when I first enrolled him, I thought, oh boy, what did I get myself into with this guy? But he had a lot going on. He was in a hit and run accident, and he ended up losing his job as well. He had 3 surgeries before we had actually enrolled him into the program. He had been walking on crutches for over a year. He could not put any weight on his one leg. He wanted a knee scooter. He wanted a knee scooter to be able to get around his home better, to be able to go outside, to be able to, go down to his neighbor's house if he wanted to, without having to use the crutches. He kept telling me, my arms are killing me. I can't even leave my house. I can't go off my front porch. And he didn't have the funds because he had lost his job. In order to have the knee scooter, the insurance was willing to pay for it, but he had to go pick it up because the service charge was like $80. And he didn't have the $80 to pay for that. But he was also having 2 more surgeries on his legs, so he needed a permanent solution, not a temporary solution by renting equipment. So again, I reached out to the social workers, and through our supportive services, we were able to purchase him a knee scooter. And I have to tell you, the phone call that I received after he received that really made me cry because he had given up. He had absolutely given up. He did not want anything more to do with life, and he just changed his whole demeanor. He was happy, he was appreciative, he was so thankful, and he said to me, I rode down to the corner for the first time in over a year. And something as simple as just providing somebody with something that they needed changed the whole outcome of their life, and this program did that.
Lesley, do you have any success stories?
I do have one patient who was actually injured outside of the country, had surgery outside of the country, did end up coming back in, but subsequently had to have multiple surgeries. But we were able to get her to stay at work. She was working light duty. What I remember about this patient, though, is she utilized both social worker and the spiritual care team that we also have as part of Retain. And I really feel that that made a difference in her recovery. Being able to navigate all those barriers, being all the way out of the country. Her injury probably lasted the 180 days that she was in Retain, but just being able to keep her focused and motivated and moving and looking ahead, looking on the end result. I really do, with everyone that helped on the Retain team, I really do feel that that had a big impact on her recovery.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm just reflecting on the quarterly meeting we just had and how we had the discussion about, what does this look like in the future? What is the most vital part of Retain that we can currently offer that we need to figure out how to offer in the future? And I feel passionately about this. I believe that unless we can ensure individuals' basic needs are met, they cannot even begin to focus on recovery. And I think I used myself as an example on that call. So if I were injured outside of the workplace and I couldn't work, I have a family. Do you know what I mean? I have bills, I have responsibilities. And if I know that I am not able to pay my house payment, pay my electric bill, pay for all of those basic needs, I personally would not even be able to begin to think about recovery. So your supportive services success story just reminded me how important it is to make sure that those basic needs are met. Spiritual care you referenced, paying the rent, the utilities, that's all things that Retain can do. And I guess when I really sit back and think about myself as an injured worker, that would be my top priority. I wouldn't even be worried about going to physical therapy if I didn't know how I was going to pay my house payment.
Well, think about what you just said, because I'm thinking of another patient who I have, and he was a truck driver, and he subsequently was injured outside of work by a truck, of all things, and he ended up with an amputation below the right arm, and he could not go back to work. I mean, he just couldn't, and that's the only thing he's ever done his whole life. He was 60 years old, and his only option in his eyes was to apply for Social Security disability. So we were able to set him up with OOD, which is the Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, and OOD was able to get him an interview with a different company, and he was still able to work in the same line of work, but he was able to do a different job, and we prevented him from applying for the Social Security disability. It is statistically proven that if somebody is off work for more than 6 months, normally they don't return to work, and their chances of applying for that is higher. So getting him back to work was very important.
Yeah, and we all know, because we talk about the podcast all of the time,
Right.
And I feel like every podcast we cite the statistics, that people feel better when they're working. Do you know what I mean? Even when I have a weekend that I'm kind of just laying around on the couch, I'm being lazy, I'm not doing anything, I don't feel as good as I do when I'm up and I'm moving and I'm being productive and active. So it's so important, not only to avoid SSDI applications specifically, but also to overall improve the well-being of the workforce in America.
Well, and you want to keep patients moving. Not everybody has the access to work at home. So people do need to leave their houses to go to work. And you run into patients who do not have short-term disability. So they have to work. Being off work and having surgery is not an option for them. I have another patient, I'm going to use as an example, who she was in an accident and she had fractured both of her legs. She had a 2-year-old child running around. She needed assistance with daycare. She was still going to work. Her ask was, can you just help me with maybe buying gas for the people that are driving me back and forth? We were unable to provide transportation services because the way it is set up right now, it has to be at a certain age. So again, supportive services. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was enough to just help her to keep going to work. And then she didn't have to be off work. So everybody's situation is different, but the supportive services is big. It's huge.
What would you guys say has been Retain Ohio's most impactful solutions throughout the patient journey?
I would have to say that the concept of supportive services that was initiated to allow patients a little bit of a break from the stress of having to meet all their financial burdens has helped patients tremendously to focus more on the physical recovery. Things that I hear from patients about, even if it's $25 that they paid someone's cell phone bill, or has really made a difference in a lot of people's lives. And I think with the addition of the social workers for that in-depth behavioral health, active listening, psychosocial support, just someone else to be in their corner as a cheerleader as they're making their way through their recovery. I think those additions have really supported what the health service coordinators and the registered nurse case managers have to do on a daily basis. It frees us up to get in the trenches a little bit more with the employer and the leave of absence case managers and those types of things, and have the time to give a more well-rounded, holistic approach to the patient care. And I'm kind of excited to say this, but I've actually seen in tracking some of the cardiac patients that we've brought on an increased compliance with the cardiac rehab, having that health service coordinator in their corner, kind of cheering them on with those monthly phone calls. So I was kind of excited to see that on my trend.
And we are a faster conduit, I think, between the physicians' offices and the patients, the employers, the disability specialists, and us, because a lot of times we will send the plan of care after we talk to the patient. They've been waiting 2 days to hear back from the doctor's office, and the doctor responds to our plan of care. We can respond to the patient, and then we can get anything that they need taken care of. And the same thing with employers as well. You know, we reach out to the employers get in touch with us. It may be just an issue of they're waiting on a return to work slip or accommodations. You know, we are that conduit. We are able to talk to the employer and say, hey, you know, this is the restrictions that are being offered to the patient. Are you able to meet those? And can we get this patient back to work? So we're able to handle some of that as well. And it alleviates a lot of stress from the patient. And then if they can focus on recovery. And the more stressed the patient is, you know, the longer their recovery. So we want to avoid that.
When you see a patient come into the program, the lack of self-efficacy to see themselves in the position they were in pre-injury, during the recovery, it's really about motivation at that point from a registered nurse to keep them positive, keep them focused on their goals for recovery, allow them that opportunity to validate their feelings, but at the same time kind of push them through that recovery so that they can see themselves on the other side. And that, for me, is, I think, one of the most rewarding things when you can see a patient go from, I don't know what I'm going to do, to, I couldn't have done it without you. I couldn't have done it without this program. Retain gave me everything I needed to stay focused and on track. I'm, you know, so happy that the social worker was there to help get me over that hump I had. So those things all put together, I think, is what makes the program what it is.
How is the relationship between the HSC and the patient's employer most advantageous?
For me, an employer that is engaged in a patient's recovery sends a message to the employee that they're valued and appreciated in the workforce and in their work environment. And that is a motivation that the patient really needs to stay on recovery, on track with recovery. And a lot of times we'll see when the patients return to work, they're actually returning sooner. But mostly to ensure that they're returning safely. But employers staying active with the plan of care and the recovery is what helps the patient stay focused. I do believe patients want to feel valued and accepted and needed in their work, their job. They spend 8 hours a day there, you know, 5, 6, 7 days a week. And I think it's really pertinent that if employers can stay engaged with the patient through their recovery, that you're overall going to see less time the patients are off. I really firmly believe that. You know, it's a team approach, and it needs to stay a team approach.
In addition to that, Lesley touched on employers being engaged. I think that is very important. And a lot of times, I think employers, when we're reaching out to them, I think originally when we first started, they felt that we were maybe stepping on their toes a little bit, and that's not our intention at all. Our intention is to get that patient back to work as soon as possible, as soon as they're recovered and they're well enough to do that. And we can provide services that I think now they're starting to understand we can provide these services, but we have team members who will actually go into the workplace. They will do a full ergonomic assessment, and they may be able to modify equipment or just provide additional equipment that the patient may need to be able to return to work sooner instead of having to stay off work longer.
And I think to add to that too is, you know, sometimes patients' leave of absence runs over that date at the end of the FMLA paperwork or whatever date the physician. And it's just being able to have that relationship with the HR and the employer to say, hey, you know, we're only looking at 14 more days longer. What can we do with this? Can you accommodate this? Are you willing to wait just 2 more weeks so that we can get this patient back to work safely to be able to do a great job for you. You know, how is this going to affect your day-to-day operations? We try to focus on that too, just to negotiate whatever we can to keep that patient where they need to be.
Agreed, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you guys give me an example of when you've had a really successful employer interaction?
So I did have a patient who I was following who worked for a specific employer, and he did subsequently go back to work, but the employer was actively engaged in getting him back to work. They were also so engaged that they ended up serving on our board of the retained program. So it has been, you know, kind of nice getting employers involved. So they've definitely stayed engaged.
Great. How about you, Lesley?
I also have a gentleman who, when he was injured, he was very young, had no clue, did not understand what FMLA was, did not realize he had to file disability paperwork to get paid from work. So we took him from step A all the way to Z with the help of his employer, making sure that he had the adequate emails, going through his chart, making sure that we were filing the FMLA paperwork with the physician who was sending it back to the employer. I would say those 2 phone calls were pretty lengthy, but just getting him to understand the whole scenario as a young adult in the workforce was kind of rewarding to see that how he put all the pieces together. He actually did end up returning to work, and he remained with the same employer.
That's amazing. The leave process is a little challenging at times, especially if it's someone who's never had to take a leave before. And I know that we had talked before about how our interventions, and Lesley, you just referenced it, really make a difference when it comes to the leave process specifically. Do you guys have any thoughts or feelings that you wanted to add for the leave process?
To be honest with you, that's the biggest barrier from my perspective, that either patients don't have the information they need or have not educated themselves on the information they need when they go on leave. There's a big communication barrier where a lot of these companies now, it's all electronic, email, don't really get to talk to a person. When you're in that state of mind during recovery, it's very difficult to keep the additional, I need to look for my emails when you've got so many things on your mind. And I feel like if an employer can, when the employer can stay engaged through that whole recovery process, again, opening up that line of communication, making the patient feel safer, making the patient feel that whatever their needs are, they're important to them, getting that paperwork filed. If you can open that line of communication, I think that you're going to have more of a success rate.
Yeah, and retain bridges that gap.
They do. They absolutely bridge that gray area.
To add to what Leslie's saying, you know, when patients are off work, they think they file for short-term disability and that's the end of it, and then they just go back to work on a scheduled day. They don't understand the process. They don't understand that they have to keep an active communication with the employer, active communication with their leave of absence manager. So providing them with that information and then just keeping them engaged and keeping them updated and staying on top of things is important as well.
Can you guys tell me why the relationship between the employer and the health services coordinator is so important?
Okay, so let's think about workers' compensation for a minute. Workers' compensation, you get injured at work, the first thing you do is file a report. You have somebody who is assigned to your case and they take care of everything. Everything from scheduling your appointments to getting a brace if you need a brace, filing all your paperwork. They do everything for you. You don't have to do anything, and they're pretty much telling you when you're going back to work. On the retained side of things, we are working with patients who are injured outside of work. So we are basically becoming their liaison, and we are talking with the employer, we are talking with the patient, we are talking with the physician. We are keeping everything in line for them so that we can let them recover and get them back to work when they're ready to get back to work.
No, I mean, I completely agree with that. And some patients, it's very easy navigation. Other patients who may have never been hurt before at work don't understand what the policy is, the procedures. We have to start from square one. When I get on the phone with them, what's your estimated return to work date? Have you filed the documentation that needs to be filed to receive your short-term disability? Are you eligible for short-term disability pay? How long have you been with the company? Let's look in your chart and see if your physician has sent that paperwork to who it needs to go to on your employer's side. You know, we're looking at all of these things every time we get on the phone with a patient. Do you need another note from the doctor for 30 days to make sure that you're going to continue to receive your short-term disability? Every employer has different policy when it comes to what paperwork is needed when a patient is off. So really assessing that and getting into the details that the patient will give you, and sometimes it's getting that paperwork if the employer is enrolled so that you can kind of scan that document yourself to make sure that the patient's doing everything they need to do.
And we are following patients for 6 months. So they are in our program for 6 months. Some of those patients are able to return to work. We have some surgeries where patients can go back to work anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. We are following them until the 6 months is up or met in the program, or until they're back to work for a couple of weeks. We still like to follow them afterwards just to make sure once they go back to work, they're not having any issues, because sometimes you can go back to work and you're still having, back pain or, knee pain, or, oh, my knee got infected, I have to go back off of work. So we continue to follow them and make sure that they're back to work and they're doing fine before we do discharge them from the program.
Right. The goal is to return to your pre-injury job description, but if that's not an option, then we're there to help you find other avenues. Do we need to consult OOD? Do we need to send you to Ohio Means Jobs to help you navigate for a job that maybe is going to fit the restrictions that you now have from the injury?
And this is where employer engagement comes in too, because if the patient is ready to go back to work and say they just can't do the job, the pain in their back is just too much, it's too much lifting, okay, so then we reach out to the employer and we say, is there anything else that this person can do so that they can keep their job, retain their job? So working with them is very important.
I would say one of the other services that really stands out that the health service coordinator provides is to really focus on the goals for recovery for the patient. And focusing on that goal, you empower the patient to become the driving force on that plan of care. And in being the driving force for that plan of care, you are actually creating a self-advocacy for that patient to speak for themselves and negotiate their return to work. That usually means that it's going to be the best plan of care for both the patient and the employer when they do return to work.
Well, thank you both for coming in today and having this conversation about Retain. We really make a big difference in patients' lives, and it's because of you guys.
Well, thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.